more about Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis joins us now from Washington, D.C. He's an active duty serving Army officer assigned to the Pentagon and a 17-year Army veteran. Davis has been deployed into combat zones 4 times in his career. He's been a frequent contributor to major publications in the U.S. and around the world. Later this month, Davis will be awarded the Ridenour Prize for Truth-Telling. The award, sponsored by the Nation Institute and the Fertile Foundation, honors whistleblowers and truth-tellers in American life. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, we welcome you to Democracy Now! Can you tell us what were the most startling findings in your report?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that when you read, as I did in the months leading up to my deployment, which began in November of 2010, that things are on the improve, things are getting better, the surge was having success, that the Afghan National Security Forces were improving, et cetera, then when you arrive on the ground, then you're very hopeful to see evidence of those things. I was on record in the Armed Forces Journal and several other publications prior to this deployment where I had acknowledged and warned that things were not going well. I had hoped that the leaders knew things that I didn't know, and when I got on the ground, I would discover things that I had not seen that would, in fact, confirm that things were going well. And I was very hopeful of that because I'll be very blunt and tell you I have no personal interest in, quote, being right, as I do to see the United States succeed and to certainly to bring a war to an end to where Americans aren't getting killed, Afghan people are not getting killed. So nothing would have made me happier than to get there and to find out that things were, in fact, getting better. Regrettably, however, that is not at all what I saw.
Lieutenant Colonel Davis, can you say a little about the scope of your report? You interviewed a large number of U.S. soldiers, 250, as well as Afghans. Can you say a little bit about the Afghans you spoke to and the Americans that you spoke to in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I will argue that I may have had the single best seat to really get an idea of what's going on in Afghanistan of anybody. And that may seem a little counterintuitive at first because I'm a relatively mid-level ranking soldier and there's a lot higher and there's a lot of other people that have greater access to certain locations, et cetera. But owing to the nature of my job and responsibilities there, which was to ensure that units had the kind of equipment that they needed to succeed, if they didn't have something, how that they needed to get it, et cetera. So my job was to travel around all over the country and talk to leaders at every level, from the division commander, or what's called the regional command in this case, 2-star generals, all the way down to brigade commanders, battalion, company, platoon leaders, all the way down to the soldiers that are going out on patrol. I'm high enough in rank to where some of the senior officers would talk to me and tell me, what they really thought about things, because they had an incentive to tell me ground truth, because, the idea was to, what can we do to help your troops out in the field? And obviously the guys out in the field also had an incentive to tell me exactly what was going on as well. And I'm not so high in rank that any of them would be intimidated by me, and they had motivation to tell me, ground truth so that I could perhaps help them get some equipment or gear that they needed in order to do their job more effectively and to be able to stay alive, which incidentally was one of the bright points, I guess, in this deployment, because I was able to do things that, would actually help keep troops alive, and that was very rewarding to me. Unfortunately, it was almost working at cross purposes when I saw the things going on. So I didn't want to just go to offices and talk to people. I didn't want to just go to brigade commands and that kind of thing. But I wanted to first to do that, but then also to go out where the things are happening, to go outside the wire, to go on dismounted patrols, to go on mounted patrols, to attend some coalition patrols, to talk to the what's called a key leader engagements, where we visited with the Afghan leaders, with the Afghan people. And I was able to do parts of all those in virtually every important part of Afghanistan over the course of 12 months, from the north to the east to the southeast and then to the south of the country. So I really had a good view to be able to say what's going on out there, I believe.
You issued 2 reports, a classified report and an unclassified report. Talk about the difference between them. Well,
the difference between them is more in in substance, are rather more in criteria, I suppose, than in substance, meaning that the end result of both of them and the conclusion that they draw are basically the same. So if you only have access to the unclassified document, you still get a real good idea of what's going on. The purpose of putting the classified version together was that the disparity between what is said and what was known at the time things were said is considerably starker than in the unclassified versions, as may be obvious. And so, periodically you've heard some senior leaders say, well, if you knew the classified information, then, this would be much more clear, but I can't talk about that. Kind of hiding behind a curtain so that no one could ask any further questions. And I didn't want that defense to be able to be leveled. And so that's why I wanted to make certain that members of Congress had this report so that they could see for themselves that, in fact, things are not the way they were portrayed. And what you see in public is actually less stark than what is known in private.
Lieutenant Colonel Davis, in your report, you give several examples of concrete instances in which what you saw makes it clear that what U.S. military officials have been saying is untrue. So could you give us one or two examples of that?
Yeah, sure. As a kind of a table setter, anytime a counterinsurgency, if you're going to go into one and to try to win it, there are several things that have to happen, and all of them have to happen to one degree or another. Number one is that the host nation government has to be at least minimally capable within cultural norms. The local security forces have to be minimally capable to be able to handle the security environment that exists, whatever that happens to be. The people of the country have to be supportive of the host nation military forces and government, and the enemy forces, the insurgent force, has to be at least knocked down enough to where they can eventually be handled by the local forces alone. All of those things have to happen to one degree or another. And as I'll argue, virtually none of them are the case in Afghanistan. Now, we've certainly read numerous reports and been given press briefings and whatnot by numerous folks, very high-ranking callers, that in fact is happening, that things are on track, that we're trending in the right direction, that we're on the right azimuth is one of the other famous comments and whatnot. So if that's true, then you would expect to see evidence of that on the ground. As you may have mentioned earlier in this broadcast, I was first deployed to Afghanistan in 2005. So I had a baseline observation of what things were like in Afghanistan several years ago. And so when I go into it now in late 2010 and early 2011, then I first of all see a dramatic difference between what I saw then and what I saw in the second half. Thirdly, if what has been said is true, that things are trending better, then you would expect to see through numerous observations in different parts of the country, looking at the Afghan security forces, that you would be able to see some improvement, that you would be able to see some competency, some going on. Now, nobody expects the Afghan security forces to ever be anything close to resembling what the U.S. Armed Forces is. So that's not the standard. As some have claimed, it's an Afghan good enough, and I wouldn't dispute that. But it has to be an Afghan good enough, and I will argue that it's not an Afghan good enough right now. So, first of all, we'll take up in the northern part of the country, the northeastern part, in Kunar province. I went up there on a couple of different occasions,